So, on to week 2 of our looking at the Masters project, which is going nicely. Nice to see what everybody's doing. I'm going to carry on with the 2 demos that I started last week, so just do a little bit more on those. So, this one was looking at this Rembrandt, copy of a Rembrandt painting, and the other one's this one, which is on the back. I'll turn that over here. So I thought I'd start with some older masters to start with. Doesn't look like some of Rembrandt's paintings look like they've got a lot of texture. This one doesn't particularly, but some of them do. But the Turner will have a bit of texture. So what I did last week was I basically covered the whole board with this burnt sienna colour, and then I've got a bit of rag and white back some of the highlights. That's all, whoops, got blue all over it now. Lifted off some of the highlights. Clean it off.
Bit of spit.
Yep, bit of spit. And then painted and drew in with the darks, which is a really nice way to work. I haven't used any white so far, so all you're seeing here is the light colour of the board showing through. And this is, I think, is possibly how they might have started. It's difficult to know, but they certainly would have started with some sort of tone or underpainting. So sometimes they do like almost like black and white, and then the next layer will be colour. Years ago, obviously, like painting, oil painting is 500 years old. Artists up until about the 19th century would have made their own paint. So they would literally have had powder, ground it up, and then put linseed oil with it. And for that sort of reason, it was an awful lot of work making paint. So you'd want to use as little as possible. And they would build their paintings up with thin layers of paint. So it's almost like thin layers of glazed paint. So that's kind of what I'm going to demonstrate in a minute. And the colours that we've got available now, they wouldn't have had, they've had some sort of lightish and brightish reds and yellows, but they wouldn't have been as easily accessible. Something like a blue would have been very, very expensive. So a lot of Rembrandt's paintings are these sort of darker colours, these kind of earthy colours made out of irons and minerals and things like that. So that's a little bit on colour. Also, the brushes would have been different. I think they had soft brushes and they had bristle brushes like these, but most of the brushes would have been round. I think these kind of filbert shapes and flatter shapes, again, were more of a 19th century invention, where they had machines that, once it was in the ferrule, they could kind of squish that and get that flatter shape. So, you know, we forget that all these things were quite different, you know, just even 100 years ago. Tube paint, you know, tube paint didn't exist. Tubes were, again, were a 19th century invention. So someone like Turner, they would have had to put it in like little pockets of leather and tie them up if they wanted to take paint with them. So it's a very different sort of process there. So with something like this, what I would then do is perhaps try and get some skin tone. So I'll use just use the colours I've got. Obviously, as I say, actually what I will do is perhaps try it with some of these earthy colours. So this is a burnt sienna, which is a nice reddy brown, and I'll use a little bit of yellow ochre. So these are the sort of colours I think they would have had available. And that actually is quite nice. So rather than going straight for something like a bright cadmium red and cadmium yellow, you can probably get some nice skin tones just using those sort of colours. I don't know if they would have had crimsons or quite what they would have had. They might have done. So again, we can sort of gradually build this up. And what I'm going to use is a bit of medium. So this is really thinners and oil mixed together. So this is a way of thinning the oil paint. So you can start to sort of put some colours down. And the idea is sort of painting quite thinly so that you can still see some of this glow underneath. So that would be some of the lighter bits. I think probably that bit wants to go a little bit lighter. Just wash the brush and I'll try and get a slightly darker tone as well. I don't like to have the brushes too wet. If I am changing the colour, I will more likely just swap to another brush. I always tend to dry the brush so that they don't get too wet. So some brown, little bit of blue, put that colour again. So again, just working into these shadow colours here. You also notice that it's not really like really hard edges, so that's where the oil paint comes in really nicely, in that you can soften edges out. Because I've already got a sort of an undercoat there, I can, you know, the next layer, I can pop over the top and you keep this nice sort of glowing look. Perhaps bring that down a little bit. Darken that, so it gradually darkens it out. So, I mean, with this one, I'll keep this one going through the week and then bring it back next week and you can see how it progresses. As you can see, I've done a little bit more than I had. Obviously, if something goes wrong, the other nice thing about the oil paints is if this will stay wet for a while, so if I wasn't happy with it, I can just literally wipe back to the previous layer, because that layer's dried. One thing about the oils is that the different colours dry at different rates. So your painting that you had that's still quite wet, I don't know when you painted, did you paint it? Weekend, yeah. So with
Friday.
Yeah, white is quite a slow drying colour. So whites and reds and yellows, they're quite slow to dry. The browns and blues are quite quick. Black's fairly long time. So with the underpainting, I tend to go for like browns and blues and not put too much white in. That way I can, you know, this will dry within a day or two really, or certainly sometimes dry enough for the afternoon. Whereas something with white, I would probably reserve that for the last couple of layers, or if I've got a bit more time. So I'll leave that one there, and I'll just turn over and we'll have a look at this next one. So that's one particular traditional approach. Rembrandt being probably a couple of hundred years before Turner. Let's whip that on. And then Turner, I can't remember when Turner was around, I think 18th, 19th century, something like that. So this one, Fighting Temeraire, which apparently he saw he was in a ferry or something like that, and then he saw this scene happening, you know, this boat from the Napoleonic Wars being tugged in, and then it was going to be dismantled. So he did a quick sketch, and then his painting he kind of reconstructed from that. With this one, what it said in the book was that he started with just coloured washes, and he started on a white canvas. So that's what I've done here. Rather than use a toned board, I've used a white canvas, and really just put a really thin wash so far of paint. So the next thing is really to build up the paint, and I probably would start with what's in the distance, like the sky. So I just swap to another brush, and I'm also going to use a little bit. So this I am going to use white. I don't know if this will work. I'm mixing this with a different kind of white that dries a little bit quicker. So I'm thinking these areas here. Let's get some of that in. Tiny bit of medium. Yeah, that's kind of working. Swapping around a bit. No, I think I'll actually go with the other white. That's going to be quicker and easier. So the thing is, gradually building up this area of sky, trying to approach the kind of cloud. That's the other nice thing about canvas is that for things like clouds, it will soften out the brushwork, so that these marks will blend in with the colours that are there. So you can see that's quite nice. The underpainting is slightly showing through, but not too much. And then I can bring this, perhaps a little bit of blue into it there. So just add a bit of blue into the mix. Some of these areas here, I think he's painted some quite thick paint on. So I'm going to work this fluid. I'm not going to worry too much about things like the masts and the rigging. I could possibly paint that. I actually moved it down a little bit last night because I didn't have enough sky in. but I'll probably get the background and then let that dry and then think up the details and paint those over the top. Probably a shape like the mast might be, the sail might be good to pop in, so perhaps just leave a gap there for that to go around. But the other thing I did want to do is just a little bit of textured paint here. So I'm going to try that with a knife. And I'm going to make it quite bright, and then what he did, and if you go to places like the National Gallery or the Tate Gallery's got a whole Turner wing. There's lots of his paintings on display there, and you can see them close up. But he did quite a bit of texture work, so I'm going to use some palette knife work here. So I'm thinking particularly these areas up here. If you're working on a reasonable scale, you've got a bit more room to do that. So I'm going to start off quite light, and then it is a bit of an experiment because I don't know exactly what he did. Basically, yeah, just using my fast drying white and mixing it with a tiny bit of the yellow ochre. I want some more down here. So this will be quite bright. And then what I'll do is let this dry, and then we could try some sort of glazes over the top, which is a technique that he did use quite a bit of. Go back for that. So just kind of a little bit textured work. Yeah, so again, I'll do a bit more of this during the week, and then see how it progresses by next week. I'll probably try and think of something else to demonstrate next week as well. Perhaps something a bit more modernist. Nice, because some of you work in sort of 19th century forward from there. Any questions? All good to go? Yes. Okay, right. Oh, right, yeah. Well, they're cash flow rather than you can use a little bit of salt. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's good. Ordinary packets. Try some these, so that's linseed oil, and this is salt. Yeah. I've used them with salt. That's all right. Should we have a little go on a bit? Sorry? Yeah, you want to try these? Yeah, these I've got. This is all sort of stuff that I've donated. Somebody gave me a rubber camera weeks ago. And these were donated. Didn't like the smell of that particular brand, so she bought herself a new one and so gave it down instead. Well, that's let's try this out first. Yeah, I'll come down. No.
She's going to be at work. instructions about when to give them.
This is so doesn't have to work like that. If you want to go back to probably let them dry.
I've done those studies. We've all done it. In my area, I studying
What's looking out for you? I didn't know you were up here.
This is where I always sit. Yeah, I know. Nearly Christmas. Nearly pantomime time. Yeah, I like to moan. I like to wander around, see what he's doing. Keep an eye on everybody.
But then take on the dry with the elbow. I think it actually I'll even try it out there. So that's the oil.
That's something.
I've got to stop.